Hey guys, Nick and Tara here, and we're at PAX Prime 2014. We both just got a chance to play Tales from the Borderlands, the new Telltale game about Borderlands. Really awesome demo, quite long actually. I was a little bit surprised how long it was.
That was a pretty big chunk, yeah.
And you, I'm curious to know your opinion on this because you are not super familiar with the Borderlands franchise.
Yeah. So my experience with Borderlands ends with Borderlands 1, and Tara is obviously a what you would call probably a diehard.
An expert.
A lore expert at the very least.
I don't know about lore expert, but
I
like
kind of.
it.
All right, cool, close enough. So I approach it as more of a Telltale fan, and right away I feel like looking at this game in motion, there are two things that jump out. One, clearly this is a Telltale game in their engine. Like the way the characters move and interact and the camera and the way that you make decisions all feels like classic Telltale. And I think maybe the upshot, and the second thing that I noticed, is that because they've been using this engine and iterating on it for years now, it's pretty gorgeous actually for a Telltale game, right? Like they've kind of been playing with a cel-shading look since Walking Dead, but it's such a good fit for Borderlands that it feels like a natural combination to me.
Yeah, I mean, Telltale has a way of taking really dark, dreary environments and somehow making them colorful and interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is any exception to that rule. It does work very similarly to how other Telltale games work. So, you know, dialogue options, some light combat here and there.
Right, yeah.
It's so interesting viewing the Borderlands world from this perspective because it's such a ridiculous, over-the-top franchise, and elements of that are still there, but you're kind of seeing the other side and getting to know a lot of the characters more.
Right, yeah.
And it's still got the same Borderlands sense of humor.
I think so. It's close enough to it, yeah.
Yeah, which is very important.
And some moments I felt like landed better than others comedically. There were lines I laughed at and lines I didn't, but that's kind of, that sounds like Borderlands to me. So,
exactly.
And it's funny because I feel like the strengths of Telltale's past games, your Walking Deads and your Wolf Among Us type games, are present, and then I think sort of the weaknesses are too. Like the combat, this engine isn't built for combat. It's always going to feel a little maybe sluggish and I don't want to say tacked on, but not the primary focus. But on the other side, what I love about these games is we get to explore universes like the Borderlands universe and like Pandaria from the perspective of people who aren't like murderers by trade, who aren't shooting hundreds of dudes. We get to like live in this universe now.
Exactly, and we were talking to one of the guys from Telltale, and he was sort of explaining to us that this is a story about storytellers. So you have the chance to manipulate the truth in a lot of situations throughout the game, and a lot of it is going to be kind of like a he said, she said scenario where you're either telling the truth or trying to convince somebody else that you're telling the truth when you're actually lying.
So we spent the first 95% of our demo playing as Reese, who's one of the two protagonists, but at the end we switched to the female
Fiona.
Fiona, and there was sort of a final decision where she contradicts his version of the story, and we had 4 different options. For mine, I chose that the negotiation went bad because the item they were negotiating for, the vault key, was shattered. And what did you choose?
I chose the option where the psycho bandit interrupts them.
Okay, so in mine, they're fighting over the case, they're like wrestling over it, they accidentally open it, the thing falls, shatters to the ground, and August pulls a gun on Reese. What happened in yours?
The psycho bandit shows up.
Just shows up and just like starts messing shit up. Yeah, and that's awesome to me. Is like so one thing that was never really present in previous Telltale games was this playing as an unreliable, well, I guess 2 unreliable narrators. Like that's a cool idea for a narrative-centric game, I think.
Yeah, and so many of the Borderlands characters are in this, even characters from the DLC from Borderlands 2, because this does take place after the events of Borderlands 2. So there are tons of like little call-outs and you know, little references to elements that are maybe not even that huge in the Borderlands series, but like hardcore fans will totally recognize those and really appreciate them.
I'll take your word on that.
Yeah, well, it's true. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is you talked about the combat a little bit. There is a really interesting part in this demo where you are able to call down a loader.
Right.
And basically have him do combat for you. You get to select his weapons. All of the little screens look like the screens, like the UI in Borderlands, which is really cool.
The whole interface was like that. Like even down to at the beginning of the conversation, it says silence is a valid option, which every Telltale game says, but it says it in like the Borderlands font.
Yeah.
When you loot money off a dead guy, like the left bumper, right bumper interface, like inventory navigation stuff pops up, even though it doesn't do anything, which is just plenty of nice details like that.
Yeah, this is literally just a marriage of Telltale and Borderlands, and I am personally thrilled by that marriage. I love both of those developers, well, Gearbox and Telltale, and so I'm really looking forward to this.
I want to see how the final thing turns out. I noticed this is episode 1, so it's going to be episodic as you'd expect from a Telltale game.
Yeah.
I hope that this turns out well and is an interesting take on the universe, because I love the idea of exploring game universes as a talker and not a shooter.
Exactly.
Like, that's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
And I want this precedent to be set, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Borderlands is such a rich universe that I feel like it would be hard to go wrong with something like this.
Right.
But they've done a really good job with it. So that is Tales from the Borderlands. Let's go check out more video games.
Yeah, there's plenty of them. The fields are semi-transparent, and actually anywhere where there are enemies, like around the side of an orb, let's say it's a spherical stage, the level kind of indents, so you can kind of see at a glance in your periphery where the enemies are lined up. They've made a bunch of changes to it. The first big structural change is that it's sort of a campaign adventure mode type thing. So